doesn't just reflect status, but specifically reflects the power of the group that you are a member of. So if you are white, if you are a man, if you are heterosexual, if you are Christian versus Jewish, these are all ways in which social dominance plays out in group hierarchies. The other construct that I mentioned earlier is conservatism. Gets a really bad rap and is generally pretty stereotyped in public conversation. So it's not just your political party affiliation or whether you went to the Trump rally on Monday, but it's also your adherence to traditional values and your need for stability and your need for continuity in the way you live your life. So one particular measure, social and economic conservatism, distinguishes between how you feel about free enterprise, business, and welfare versus traditional marriage and abortion and things like that. So I also got the really cool opportunity to work with Amazon Turk, which is this software where you can pull respondents from anywhere in the world, even hypothetically Antarctica, if they have internet there. And so I was able to sample 239 folks from a wide range of countries, including Serbia, Montenegro, India, a lot of folks from the United States, and yes. So for all of these participants, we looked at their emotional intelligence on the self-report scale, their social dominance orientation, and their conservatism. So first thing I looked at was whether there were actually group differences on any of these scores. The literature says that there should be pretty major differences between men and women on emotional intelligence that didn't show up in this sample. But there were major differences between men and women on social dominance orientation. Women had a much lower social dominance orientation than men. We're very surprised. When it comes to racial groupings, because of the way the sample ended up distributing, I didn't have enough numbers in all of the racial categories to do multiple or to do a full ANOVA, so it ended up being a comparison between whites and people of color. And so with that collapse, or categorical collapse, emotional regulation of the self and utilization of emotions in problem solving were the two dimensions of emotional intelligence that showed group differences where people of color scored significantly higher. And the only political variable where there is a difference along race lines was economic conservatism, where whites scored significantly higher. And then finally, when it came to religious identities, which we constructed as the religious majority, so people who are Christian in America or Hindu in India, people who are religiously unaffiliated in either country, and then people who are in religious minorities in both nations. All of the political variables showed significant differences where the people in the religious majority scored much higher than all other groups. Okay. And then looking at how each of those variables related for each identity grouping, there's a lot of numbers. I won't go into all of it. But basically my initial idea that SDO and emotional intelligence are related didn't quite pan out. Sad times. It did, however, show up for women, particularly, a negative relationship between EI and SDO. So the more emotionally intelligent you are, the less likely you are to endorse group hierarchy. For all the other cool things, including conservatism, there were significant relationships between conservatism, broad conservatism and emotional intelligence, as well as broad conservatism and emotional self-regulation, which was not something that I expected to see. And there was also, and that correlation continued through for social conservatism, which, once we start thinking about it, kind of makes sense if it's going to be there for broad conservatism. What was pretty surprising was that economic conservatism only related to emotional intelligence, specifically emotional self-regulation, for men, whites, and people in the religious majority, which was therefore the only finding that actually aligned with what I expected. By being in a position of dominance and power and having more conservative economic values, there's a connection there. There's words for that. Right. So, right. Basic summary, SDO and emotional intelligence, no dice. Conservatism and emotional intelligence, something's up there. So, hopefully in the future, looking at conservatism and emotional intelligence will actually be a thing that people investigate. I would really like to see what effects social desirability of responses might have on this. Ideas of generosity, charity, religious obligation could play into social conservatism as well as emotional intelligence. And what exactly is being constructed as emotional self-regulation and why that's important if you have a conservative mindset or if you have social values that are more conservative. What are you allowed to do? What do you need to do